Hello everyone, this is the Hornet 120 from HGLRC. Featuring the F13 flight stack, which has a 13 amp 4-in-1 ESC, an F4 flight controller with an OSD, the XJBTX20 version 2 with pit mode, 25 milliwatt, 100 milliwatt, 200 milliwatt, and 350 milliwatt, HGLRC Tech flame motors, 1106, 6000 kV, a 600 TV line micro CCD camera, gem fan, 2540 props. It has a buzzer and LEDs, XT30 for your battery connection, comes with a battery strap, 2 extra props, screws, 1-page instruction sheet, and stickers. Bottom plates measuring almost 3 millimeters. Pod plate's about the same. It weighs 84.42 grams. We've got another nice kit here with all the parts that we might expect from a quality machine. We've got a stack. I've used this stack a lot to build, and we saw that on the DT140. It's a nice stack. I suspect many of you use it as well. Some people don't care for it because of the pins, and the pins can come loose. HGLRC themselves now include this flight stack if you order it alone with long metal rods. Some people very much prefer soft mounting everything. You can see we have some soft mounting down here. Hopefully that comes through, but it's kind of squished down because it is quite tight in there. So that's going to be muted effect there. Some people prefer a flight controller with built-in gummies and things of that nature. So that's something you need to consider if you have a preference for one of those. This might not be the one for you. We normally would have a well-protected camera out here, but you see the camera I have replaced doesn't quite get protected. The original is a shorter nose, and speaking of the original, I had to swap that out because I spent a number of flights tuning before I finally saw Albert's video and discovered that apparently these cameras are having a bit of a problem with jello. And with my tune, I saw that I had jello most of the time when I was flying very aggressively, not even on high pitch or high throttles, which I think is what Albert suffered from. He would see the jello in the video when he would really hit the throttle. I would see it at half throttle, so my tune's a bit different, so that might be something you need to consider with your tune. And speaking of tune, I'll go ahead and put that on the screen now. You can use that if you'd like. This stack is very tight. We have very little room for our receiver. You can see I've got an XM in there, and I put some tape on the bottom side of that, and I just kind of wedge it in there. You might want to do the same, but I did notice on my crashes this would come loose every once in a while, and that was one of the reasons why I routed the antenna down, and we just have this tiny bit sticking out here. Not ideal, but it works, and it stayed out of the way. I just used a zip tie right there. I also added some strainer leaf to make sure that our battery lead didn't come through. Actually, I might be mistaken, but maybe that strain release came from the factory. So I'm having a hard time in the moment recalling if I added that or if that came stock with the machine. So unfortunately, I can't be for certain there whether it comes with it or not. It does look very similar to the same sort of zip ties they used on the arm, so that may have come stock. I apologize, I can't remember off the top of my head. I do think they could make an improvement with their design. We've mentioned this before, to where if we had a slider here instead of just a single hole, then we could adjust for different size cameras, which you might need. I think the primary question that's going to come up quite a bit with this is this the best? Does this beat the Aurora Minifight? And in many regards, it does. In outright performance, I think it's very, very close, but this one's lighter, so you're going to get more upward thrust quicker. This one has a much better protected camera. As you can see, we're quite exposed with this one. I think strain relief is also easier to have on the 120, but when I have to quantify this a bit. I do think the components used within the 120 are better. Like I said, I've used these in many builds, and we don't have that same sort of quality components, or at least perceived quality of components. These could be just as good. In my experience with running this, I haven't had any problems. I think from a style standpoint, this one does take the cake a little bit. It's got the braiding on here if you're into that sort of thing, and it's got blue matching motors. I know they match the motors in the standoffs, but that's really about the only style that we have here. Both have buzzers, both have LEDs. You can see my support for this broke off, and this one doesn't have any support, but you also see that I have had some prop strikes as well. Now that didn't happen in flight. That happened when I got tangled up in a tree, and you can see I've chopped up the backside a little bit too, but the antenna still seems intact. So that's something you need to consider when you're getting yours, is you probably want to add either a zip tie around here or around here and give this a little bit more support. Typically what I do is a zip tie and some heat shrink around it. Hopefully you have some of that. You can also use electrical tape. That works quite well, or even duct tape. Just anything to kind of shore that up a little bit so it doesn't wiggle around too much. So I would rate this my #1 micro RTF with one caveat, and that is the camera. If your camera comes and it's like mine, then that devalues this quite a little bit. A replacement camera is going to run you anywhere from low 20s to $30, depending upon which camera. If you go directly for the HGLRC camera, I think they're in the mid 20s. So that takes the price point up if you purchase this. Now, I would hope that HGLRC has probably remedied this in sending out review units, and I have not had mine terribly long. I've had it for probably 2.5+ weeks. Hopefully this was just an issue with a certain batch of cameras they have. Thankfully, I don't have any others to test that against, but I did put this Mista camera in here. We've seen that before, and it's very comparable to what you get stock. It has the same sort of pinout. They could be the same sensor for all I know, but this one just has a longer lens on it, so maybe the sensor is a bit different. You can see off the front I took a hard crash, and these big thick pods plates stood up quite well. So I can't complain about the durability, really. I think the only thing that I would complain about is this out of the box doesn't come secured, but that's something that I normally have to take care of myself anyways, because they try to pack these in as small a box as possible, because they do oftentimes do free shipping. Currently on the HGLRC website, these are retailing for $164.99. And I think it's a pretty good value. I think the motors perform well. They used a nice set of props. It's got a nice clean build. I really don't have too much to complain about. It is a little bit different than what we see with a lot of HGLRC stacks, in that they don't have tabs off the ESCs. You can't really see it in here because it's the ESC pads are in the front and back. But they don't have tabs off of that board, and I didn't know that. That was a little bit unexpected when I got in there and I was trying to look for a spot to put my receiver. I think if you're going with a DSMX receiver for Spectrum, you could probably get it in between the flight stack if you choose to, right in between that board, because this one is a little bit thicker than the DSMX ones I used. You can get a Spectrum satellite. It would probably also go in there, and then you could route your antennas up through the back here. To secure those nice and tidy out of the way. I thought the buzzer was nice and loud. It's a nice micro buzzer. I didn't have any problems with that like I have in other machines. This flies so well that you can really kill your batteries. And one of the things that you probably noted in the flight footage, you're going to get about 2 minutes of flight if you fly like I do, in the altitude I do, in the humidity, all those sort of environmental variables. You may get a lot longer flight time if you live or fly somewhere else or in a different way. I don't necessarily think of that as a con anymore. As we continue to push for more performance out of our micros, we get bigger motors, we get more aggressive props, and our battery technology really hasn't accelerated with those developments. You may want to consider running some larger size batteries. I have a couple from my team sponsor, the Ministar lines. You will find that these batteries are a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier than normal. So for the same mAh rating or milliamp per hour rating, and you will find that you get more longer flight time if you compare the milliamp hour to another battery. So you might consider those, or you might would just want to live with a shorter flight time than what you would get on other micro models. But again, we can't complain about that too much. When we keep asking for performance, our flight times are going to keep getting shorter. One other improvement that I think they could make as we start to see camera developing, like the SQ12 here. This came with the TPU print. You could probably find a bunch of these on Thingiverse. If you try to mount this up, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge because of this hump in the middle. And so I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit bigger, or thicker, should I say, top area, so where this was all flat and smooth, so it'd be easier to mount something like this. But maybe you can get it done, going before or after that, or maybe just design a mount of your own that secures that down. Also, to give you another example, the Hawkeye Firefly. You can see I've carved this one up. I'm trying to work on the mount not getting in the view. But that would be quite a challenge to make it flat. You probably have to wedge something under there one way or another. So that's one improvement I think they could make to the frame itself. I think they could also maybe lose some weight. We've got some big M3 hardware right up through here. We might be able to drop that to M2 or 2.5 and reduce our weight a bit. We've also got this nut and locking mechanism for the top pods, which it works great. I don't want to criticize that, but we do have some extra hardware in there, so maybe a different mechanism for getting this to lock in a place that might be a little bit wider. We might be able to shave a gram or two off, and for all the grams that we shave off, then we can we increase our performance, and we possibly also increase our flight time. This is a very good model. I think it flies great. I don't think anybody would be dissatisfied with how it flies or how it performs. And if you're looking at this versus the Aurora Mini Fight, if you're aware of the camera issue, I do think this is the one to have. If the camera comes and it works perfectly, then I think this is the one to have. If you get one with a camera that has the same issues that mine has and that Albert has, then I think that the Mini Fight is the way to go if the camera issue persists. So you might want to check out other reviews. You might want to ask of those reviewers or people who have these that are showing flight footage of them when they got theirs. That might be an important detail to also get, because it would be quite sad to get your machine. And, the camera, it's not terrible. It's just an annoyance. I've suffered from some other cameras, the Foxeer Predator Micro. I've stated this before, I bought 6 of those, and half of them had jello in there, and I've gotten new lenses for it, and it's taken care of it every time. So instead of buying a $35 camera, I went and bought a $35 camera and a $10 lens, so I've got $45 in camera, and that doesn't make me happy because that's more money than I planned on spending for those. I do like those images, but this camera that comes with it, the image seems fine. It's not on the Predator level, but it is what we expect from a micro CCD camera. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. There'll be a link if you want to check this out on the HGLR website as well down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.